Welcome to the Love Story Vlog channel, Queen's Story. Now let's enjoy part 5 of the story, Bowing Low. Chapter 7, The Marquis Returns. After Xiaohao had departed, the once lively and music-filled provincial governor's residence gradually fell into silence. The guests dispersed, and Qiao Yue, seeing that Xiaobing still stood frozen before the main gate, unmoving for a long while, walked over and gently urged his younger brother. "Second brother, your daughter has already left. You saw with your own eyes how grand and joyous the scene in the city was just now. As your elder brother, I am truly pleased." Xiaobing slowly turned around and replied, "Elder brother, there is something I ought not to ask, but I've been dwelling on it for many days. Now that the moment presents itself, I must be so bold as to speak. 10 years ago, when father raised troops to campaign against Li Su, he remained inactive at the front lines. As a result, both Wei Jing and his son perished in battle, which led to the deep enmity with the Wei family. I must ask, at that time, did father ever send word to Wei Jing? You were with the army then. Surely you know the truth." Qiao Yue was momentarily stunned, then immediately wore an expression of displeasure. He waved his hand and said, "That matter is long past. Why bring it up now? Whatever decision father made then, he surely had his reasons. As sons, how could we interfere in such things?" But Qiao Yue's firm denial only strengthened Xiaobing's suspicions. After the incident in Chen Commandery 10 years ago, when the Wei family was mourning, Xiaobing had been sent to Yuyang by their father, Xiao Kui, to offer condolences. Before the mourning hall, a family retainer of the Wei clan drew his blade in fury, denouncing Xiao Kui as a deceitful fox who broke his word and never sent warning, simply waiting to reap the benefits. Xiaobing was terrified, believing he might never make it out of the Wei household alive. But unexpectedly, Lady Xu of the Wei family had scolded the retainer loudly in his presence and gently consoled. Xiaobing instead, having survived the ordeal and returned to Yanzhou, Xiaobing recounted everything to his father. He remembered clearly that father had furrowed his brows in silence for a long while, then sighed and said, "And with such a matriarch in the Wei family, I fear they will bring trouble to our Qiao clan in the future." Over the past 10 years, Xiaobing continued to harbor doubts. Perhaps father truly never did send word back then. Their father was a man of deep cunning and high ambition. Though the Wei family's influence had at the time been confined to the northern reaches of Yanwu and had not crossed into Yanzhou's domain, Wei Jing was known for strict military discipline, held the title of Marquis, and enjoyed wide renown for his virtue and talent. Scholars from across the realm flocked to him, and he carried the shadow of a potential future sovereign. Perhaps father had already anticipated the day the Wei family would rise and pose a threat to Yanzhou, and so sought to use Li Su's hand to remove that hidden danger. "Second brother," said Qiao Yue, "our two families are now united by marriage. The feud dissolved, and the crisis facing Yanzhou resolved. Why dwell on such things? There's no need to overthink it." Xiaobing gave a bitter smile. "Elder brother, since Manman has now married into the Wei family as you desired, and Yanzhou's troubles have been temporarily eased, I hope you will now devote yourself fully to state affairs, restore the Chou family's prestige, and bring peace to the people of our commandery. As for Manman, at least in the Wei household, she will have some support." Xiao Viet looked somewhat embarrassed and replied with a laugh, Of course. Don't worry, second brother." Wei Ling led a squad of Wei family guards, escorting Xiao Qiao northward. They traveled by day and rested at night, their journey smooth and uninterrupted. Before long, they reached the borders of Ji Prefecture. One evening, as the sky began to darken and their convoy had yet to reach the next postal station, they happened to be passing through a winding, desolate road. Wei Liang sensed someone was tailing them from behind, so he immediately ordered his men to double back and investigate. The returning soldiers reported that nothing unusual was found. Although Wei Liang appeared rough on the outside, He was actually extremely cautious. Without revealing any concern, that night, upon reaching the postal station, he personally stood guard outside Xiao Chao's room with a blade in hand. The following day, to increase vigilance, they picked up their pace, traveling ever faster. Finally, just before New Year's Eve, Xiao Chao was safely brought to Ji Prefecture. The former inspector of Ji Prefecture, Han son of Gao Tang, had seized control of the administration, persecuting loyal and virtuous officials. The Han court was left only in name. He rebelled against the imperial court, slaughtered all who opposed him, and declared himself emperor. The court dispatched troops multiple times to encircle and suppress him. But Han Sun, with years of experience, a strong army, and a geographical advantage in Ji Prefecture, was impossible to defeat quickly. Left with no other option, Wei Xiao was ordered to take action. Last autumn, Wei Xiao personally led troops into Ji Prefecture. Previous military campaigns had already devastated the region. Each wave of troops left the people of Gui Prefecture stripped of skin and flesh. Some imperial soldiers even went so far as to surround villages, massacre the peasants, and bring back their severed heads, pretending they were rebel leaders, just to claim rewards. The people suffered immensely. When word spread that Wei Xiao from Yu Prefecture was coming, the terrified populace fled in all directions, abandoning ripe fields of barley, hiding wherever they could. In some places, entire villages were left deserted. Yet, upon arrival, Wei Xiao's troops did not lay a hand on a single item. Seeing the fallen barley fields, left unharvested, the soldiers removed their armor and began to reap the crops, piling them neatly at village gates. Along the way, they also captured deserters and bandits hiding in the forests. News spread fast, first by word of mouth, then by dozens, then by hundreds. Soon, refugees who had fled returned in droves. Some able-bodied young men even volunteered to enlist. The attitude of the locals along the route changed drastically. They beat drums and gongs, joyfully welcoming Wei Xiao's army into Ji Prefecture. With popular support behind him, Wei Xiao was like a tiger with wings. In several battles, Gaotang forces lost city after city, finally retreating and locking themselves within the walls of Xin City. They dared not emerge. Wei Xiao did not attack immediately. He set up camp and rested his troops. At the start of the year, after months of siege, he seized the momentum and stormed the city, capturing Xin City. With no path left, Han Sun took his own life. The people of Ji Prefecture spread the news and, led by a respected elder, pleaded on behalf of the entire populace for Wei Xiao to remain. Wei Xiao submitted a memorial to the court, stating that remnants of Gao Tang's forces still lingered outside Xin City and that, in accordance with the people's wishes, he would stay to eliminate the remaining rebels. The imperial court, wary of his expanding influence, initially refused and ordered him to withdraw. Wei Xiao obeyed and pulled back. Unexpectedly, the officials appointed to replace him were all stopped at the city gates by the people. This happened repeatedly until no one dared to accept the post in Ji Prefecture. With the region beyond its control, the court had no choice but to acquiesce to the will of the people and allow Wei Xiao temporary governance. The second time Wei Xiao entered Ji Prefecture, the citizens lined the roads in double rows to welcome him with cheers. Now, nearly a full year had passed. Recently, Wei Xiao had remained stationed in Xin City. Compared to Yuyang, Xin City was even closer, so the wedding was scheduled to take place there. Though the ancient city of Xin was not particularly large, in Ji Prefecture, there was no one who did not know its name. Ji, another name for Hebei, China. During the Warring States period, Zhao and Wei fought bitterly for 3 years. When Zhao lost Handan, they had no choice but to offer Xin City as compensation. Within the city, the Xin Palace was built. Inside stood a pavilion called Dan Tower, constructed from century-old sandalwood. towering over 10 jang high. From the tower, one could overlook the entire city. Though centuries had passed, it still stood, having undergone several restorations. The characters for Xin Palace had since been changed. It now served as the military governor's private residence. Whenever Wei Xiao stayed in Xin City, he always first set foot in Xin Palace. Xiao Qiao's bridal carriage slowly rolled through the city gates. Through the curtain of her carriage, she glimpsed the still, ripple-free moats surrounding the city. The main streets were paved with massive square-cut bluish stones, wide enough for 10 horses to ride abreast. Houses lined both sides of the road in close ranks. The scene reminded her of the familiar streets of Dongjun. The old customs of Yan and Zhao stood before her, vivid and striking. The men, women, young, and old along the roadside all stopped to gaze at her passing carriage, faces filled with curiosity, as if they had never expected Wei Xiao would take a wife in such a manner. After traveling down a road thick with curious stares, the carriage finally came to a stop at the gates of Xin Palace. The imposing guards clad in armor stationed there recognized Wei Liang and opened the gates for them. Xiao Qiao was helped down from the carriage, finally free from the days of jostling and bumping on the road. Together with Chun Yang and a few dowry maids, she entered Xin Palace. The journey had been dull and tedious. To pass the time, Chun Yang had often speculated about the wedding ceremony awaiting them, now seeing it with her own eyes. Though Xin Palace was indeed vast, and its halls solemn, the place was eerily empty, not to mention the grand wedding festivities. Chun Yang had imagined, at this moment, there weren't even many people around. After a short while, a woman in her 40s appeared, dressed formally, with a dignified and somewhat stern expression. Several older maids followed behind her. She introduced herself as Madame Zhong's, sent by order to welcome the bride from the Chao family. Though her tone was courteous, her gaze toward Xiao Qiao carried a certain coldness. Xiao Qiao guessed that although this woman was a servant, her status within the Wei household was likely quite high. Following custom, Xiao Qiao addressed her as Madame Zhong. "No need, miss. I am but a humble servant acting on orders. It would be proper for you to call me Granny Zhong." The woman replied. Granny Zhong led Xiao Qiao to her quarters, called Yu Yang Pavilion, a very clean residence in the southwestern part of the palace. Granny Zhong left 2 old maids to serve Xiao Qiao, telling her that if anything was needed, she could come find her. After saying this, she respectfully bowed to Xiao Qiao and then turned and left. As soon as Granny Zhong was gone, Chun Yang couldn't help feeling a little disappointed and even more sympathetic toward Xiao Qiao. She shoved the 2 old maids aside and, together with the dowry maids, began making the bed and tidying up. While doing so, she muttered under her breath, "Is the Marquis of Wei even in the city right now? And when is the wedding supposed to be?" Chun Yang had no clue, and Xiao Qiao herself was just as in the dark. After so many days of bumping along in the carriage, her feet were sore and numb. She got up and walked to the window, pushed it open, and gazed outside. The unfamiliar courtyard, beside Yu Yang Pavilion, where she now stayed, an ancient towering building stood. A shaft of sunlight happened to pierce through the gap beneath its curved roof, forming a bright ring of golden light, so dazzling it almost hurt the eyes. Each day, at set times, food and warm water were delivered. The care was thorough, yet it felt as if Xiao Qiao had been forgotten. She barely left the gates of Xin Palace, and it seemed no one gave her any further thought. Since that day, Granny Zhong had not appeared again, and her supposed husband, if one could even call him that, this man named Wei Xiao, had yet to show so much as a shadow. In the blink of an eye, the year was drawing to an end. Chun Yang began to grow anxious. She pestered the 2 old maids for news countless times, but they only followed Granny Zhong's orders. No matter what Chun Yang asked, they would simply shake their heads. If pressed, they would fall to their knees and beg forgiveness, which left Chun Yang frustrated and helpless. She wanted to seek out Granny Zhong for answers, but Xiao Qiao stopped her. When the soldiers come, the general will block them. This was just the beginning. Since he wasn't in a hurry, neither would she be. The 7th year of the Dinkang era's Spring Festival approached quickly. On clear days, Xiaoko would climb up Dan Tower, from where she could see the surrounding people bustling to clean their homes, wash their clothes, and hang them out to dry, busy with preparations for the coming new year. It was only after arriving here that Xiao Qiao learned the Spring Festival, regarded by later generations as the most auspicious family holiday of the year, was not originally associated with good fortune. In the simple beliefs of antiquity, it was not a season of luck. Like bamboo nodes, smooth at the base, only the troublesome festivals were marked by ceremony. The so-called Spring Festival was, in fact, the most ominous part of the season. To drive out evil and seek blessings, people used family gatherings to cleanse away the old and welcome the new. But the scale of festivities here was far more subdued than in future times. Xiao Qiao could not go out, nor did she particularly wish to. But no one could stop her from climbing Dan Tower to enjoy the view. Dan Tower was tall, taller even than the city walls. Standing on its uppermost level, she could see the boundless fields stretching beyond the city. A few days before the year's end, snow began to fall. At noon, the snow stopped. The sun emerged, sparkling and brilliant. Xiaoko napped through the afternoon, and when dusk fell, she climbed Dan Tower once more. In recent days, she often came to Dan Tower to await the sunset at this hour. Beyond the city walls lay an endless expanse of countryside. The setting sun gathered its final rays upon the fields, and then, at last, sank fully beneath the horizon. If she had been a poet, perhaps she might have composed a verse about watching the sunset from a tower, one that could be passed down through the ages. This evening scene was much like the days before, except that a new layer of snow now blanketed the rooftops. The streets below were mottled black and white, like stars scattered across the sky. The white was fresh snow. The black was the exposed road beneath, where countless footsteps had trampled the surface. As usual, the people made the most of the remaining daylight, bustling about. They hurried along with baskets and carts, moving quickly. Children laughed and played in the alleyways, gathering snow. Their joyous voices seemed to echo all the way up to her high perch. It's getting late, so cold. The wind feels like it's cutting right through us. There's a brazier in the room. My lady, let's go back down, urged Chunyang. Chubby as she was, Chunyang was panting slightly after climbing dozens of steps. She tried to persuade Xiao Qiao, draping a fox fur cloak over her shoulders. In all her life, Chunyang had never left the mild climate of Dong Commandery. When she first arrived here, it was hard for her to adjust to the conditions. She wished she could just stay inside the room from morning till night. At the top of Dan Tower, the wind was fierce. Xiao Qiao cupped her hands and blew into them for warmth. The lingering heat she gathered, she pressed to her icy cheeks, just as she was about to turn and head down with Chunyang. A deep, distant rumbling suddenly echoed from the horizon where the sun had just set. At first, the sound was faint and indistinct, low and restrained. Xiao Qiao thought she might have imagined it. But very soon, the rumble grew louder, so abruptly that it caught one unprepared, like thunder rolling across flat ground. Unconsciously, Xiao Qiao stopped in her tracks and turned again toward the distance. Beyond the city walls, the vast snowy wilderness lay silent, as if still asleep. Then suddenly, it seemed to awaken. Her gaze swept to the farthest edge. Snowflakes were being whipped up by strong winds, a swirling mass that half obscured the setting sun at the horizon. Amid it all, a flag could be glimpsed faintly in the center. What is that? Chunyang followed her gaze, eyes wide with alarm. Her voice trembled slightly with fear. Xiao Qiao continued to watch. The rumble grew louder and clearer. At last, she could see it. An enormous cavalry force, racing toward the city. There were thousands of riders, moving like thunder as they drew closer. The Marquis is back. The Marquis is back. Amid the deafening thunder of hooves pounding the earth. Moments later, a great shout erupted beneath the city walls. It rose like a wave, carried higher and higher, by the wind, until it echoed above the ancient fortress and rang in Xiao Chao's ears. People on the streets stopped in their tracks. After a brief stunned moment, they all turned and rushed en masse toward the city gate. The Marquis is back! The Marquis is back! The whole city burst into chaos. Crowds poured out of their homes, spreading the news excitedly. Ever since Xiaoqiao had arrived in Xindu, she had stayed in Xin Palace for about half a month. Now, on a snowy evening at dusk, the Marquis of Yan, Wei Xiao, finally returned from Bouling, 100 miles away.